Hey guys, quick disclaimer. Today's episode is going to be a little bit gritty, a little bit real, and so I want you guys to be just aware. If you have any children around or in the room listening, I would recommend maybe putting them in a different room or putting on some headphones. There will be some use of a little bit of a strong language and going into some touchy subjects and some harder things. So just letting you know out of respect, stay tuned and enjoy the episode.
Welcome to The Friend of Sinners.
Hey!
I think we need to get the applaud thing. That'd be fun. I think we're on episode 11, and I am your host for the moment. I'm Josh. This is
Jonathan.
And I'm not going to introduce him yet. So we have a special
Mystery
guest of someone you've seen before. It's a special episode today. We get to learn all about our magnificent host, Andrew. And so
Hey, it's me.
That's Andrew. So please tell us your life story. We want to know.
Yeah, so I'm Andrew Bakken. So I'm your host, and yeah, I was just, as far as with this episode, I wanted to just kind of dig a little bit into some of the parts that I kind of usually am reluctant to share on some information. So you guys are going to be able to hear a little bit more detail. It's going to get a little gritty, a little bit harder, just a little disclaimer with that. But yeah, so I kind of hesitated a little bit because with my testimony and story, I usually give like a PG-13 version. So today I'm going to do a little dive into some of the details that might be a little bit uncomfortable. But as far as my life story, I know earlier I mentioned I grew up in a Christian family, and I'm blessed to have that. Going up until about senior year, I was pretty actively involved with the church.
Take us back, though, a little further. Tell us about your childhood.
Yeah.
Quickly.
As far as, my life, I've grown up in a Christian household. My childhood, as far as, I was born in a Christian family. I've always went to church, and my family's always been going to church. My grandfather literally was, arrested and persecuted because he believed in God in Russia and during the whole Soviet Union, more specifically during that kind of era.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I come from that kind of a background in my life, and I was born in the States, but almost 60%, 70% of my family was born outside of the U.S. So
Can you say something in Russian?
Нет.
Yeah.
Just no.
I knew that one.
Just no. Yeah, I grew up on California, hate it all you like. I still think it's beautiful in some aspects, but yeah, I love Florida so much more. I agree. It's just California's.
You were born in California?
Yeah, I was born in California and Sacramento.
How long were you there?
So my parents were there for about 5 years before I was born, and then I lived there, or I was born and I lived there for the first 11 years of my life.
Okay.
And then the rest I've just been in here in Florida. So more than half my life I've been out here. Went to school, middle school and high school here, and just kind of grew up. So I consider this my home. Just growing up, yeah, I've always been active in the church. I've always, been growing up and just study and know the stories of the Bible. And I think, it's a little bit hard to know exactly when it happened, but I would say somewhere around in my senior year. I always kind of, when I describe it to people, is when I guess I started to realize I can make my own decisions. And that's kind of where I got to the point where I'm like, do I want to believe in God, or do I want to do church because it's what I've grown up to, or is this what I really want to do? Mm-hmm. And I think that's when I started to just kind of fade away. And it's I just don't really care for it. I want to try something different. I want to live a little bit of my own life.
What was it that made you? What you said? I want to live my own life. Mm-hmm. What does you living your own life not correlate with Christianity?
Yeah. So there's several things that was going on at that point. One was just a lot of just disappointment in God not answering prayers. Particularly because at that time, I had a sister who, at one point in our life just kind of up and left the family, and just without any communication and just constantly praying hey, bring her back. Cause I had no idea where she was for a good chunk of I think about 8 years. Oh. She is back now. And she's, I was just overseeing her yesterday or the day before, and so that got answered a lot later. But during that time, I was really pissed off with God. Like
Right.
what's going on? Like, I just feel like I lost someone in my family, and then at that time, I've also been watching porn and growing up in that, and just not knowing how to reconcile or just dealing with that guilt and shame. I'm like, I'm not a good Christian, so why should I bother following it? Like, I'm not gonna live up to what I should anyways.
How old were you when that started?
I started with like little Victoria's Secret magazines when I was like 9 years old. I would think about 9 to 10 years old. That was the first kind of like
I
exposure.
think that's statistically where it generally starts. Is around
Yeah,
that age and years.
and so I would say just kind of that's when I started to kind of get into that kind of lifestyle. And so just growing up all the time in the church, and then like I said, I just felt like a hypocrite, and I was like, this wasn't going to work out too well. And I would still occasionally go to church and during that time, but it would either because like my brother just wanted to drag me along with him, or especially if I'm going through something, I'm like, hey, there's a God who can answer prayers and fix things, right? Like, just come to him. And when that was said and done, and that was taken care of, or my problem wasn't existent, like, okay, God, see you later. Hey, I got what I wanted. I got my fix.
Right.
But so yeah, and I would say around senior year, and that's, I would say that's when my depression started. When I started to just enter this lifestyle and phase of depression. Like up until that point, I would say I was just a really happy child, considering like we grew up pretty poor, and like we always laugh at our childhood, like just the food we would eat, and just like I was sharing with another friend, like we would literally just get a block of mozzarella cheese, like that's what we can afford. We would slice it up, put it in a cup in a microwave, eat just straight up melted cheese.
Really?
Wow.
Yeah, it was just so funny laughing. Like just top ramen was like, or a cup noodles was like a luxury.
Yeah.
Wow.
Like I said, as far as parents, everyone they were Christian, and I'm super thankful I didn't have like abusive parents or something like that. Like, oh man, I'm as much as some parts are hard. At least we had a pretty good family unit. So.
And how many siblings are there?
Yeah, so I have 6 brothers, 2 sisters, all blood related, all from my 2 parents, and so. It was a pretty big family, and
so there's 9 of you.
There's 9 of us total. I'm the second youngest, and my oldest brother I think is like 21 or 22 years older than me. So, my niece is only like 2.5 years younger than I am. Right. So I grew up. I was almost practically born an uncle.
Yeah.
So it's just kind of funny, like just that like their age gap isn't that even far. Between me and my nieces compared to me and my older brothers. Yeah, that was kind of a little bit more of my earlier life.
You said senior year,
Yeah, that's when I would say that's when like I guess I started to become more like I guess I don't know, like I don't know how to describe, like that's I guess when you become an adult or you just start to make your own decisions.
Were there reasons why you felt like you needed to become an adult, or?
I don't know. I don't know if there was reasons why I needed to become like an adult. I just felt like I guess maybe I was just kind of given more responsibility, or just figure out your life your own way, do what you want to do. And, instead of just following instructions from parents, it's like, okay, I need to make my own decisions now. And shortly, even after 18, I think I was like 19 when I already left and moved out of the house. I didn't stay too very long after, getting out of high school. And so with that, and so that's when, again, I started to get into depression, and then there would be cycles of like highness or like extreme modes of like suicide. And so I started to have suicide ideation and fantasy about that. And like usually it typically like once a year for like a month or a season, it would just kind of really peak out and just get really intense, just fantasizing suicide or just attempting or struggling with that. And so that was also a really big part. And this played on for 5 years into my life at that point from my senior year.
Starting in senior year,
yeah. And I don't remember if it was like mid senior year or late and something like that. I know, related to when I started to work.
Had you experienced like depression before that?
No, before that, I was a really happy kid. I mean, I always cracked jokes and just always had fun and laughter.
And the turning point was when your sister left?
Like that happened, and it just I was still pretty optimistic. I was still like believing in God and very active in that. it's just after several years of just non-answered prayers and, again, dealing with the guilt and shame of like pornography in particular, and just feeling like a hypocrite. Like I don't add up to like the Christian lifestyle that my church and the people in there, share that I should be like. And so it's like, well, I'm not a good Christian. Why should I be a Christian? Like, it's not a very good example. And so one thing why I love this church is grace. Just, like, hey, we're Christians, but we're not like, none of us live to the expectation. And that's something I had to learn later on. So I was just very disappointed in myself. And with that depression and suicide, I just started to hate myself more and more. And so, yeah, it's a hard, like, I don't know what exactly started and why it exactly came there. I just know, I guess, once I started to make my own decisions, start to come with their own consequences. And so, yeah, starting that, I, now I'm living my own new life, or my own life. I wanted to hang out with some of the other friends and, picked up into drinking, smoking weed, trying to get into some relationships. And, yeah, I just kind of had like a little, I wouldn't say it's anything too wild, compared to some of the other people I know who go to parties all the time and do all these wild things. But it was just kind of exploring and going into these other areas and just kind of figuring out what I want to do with my life. I didn't know what I want to do for my future or career. I just picked up some minimum jobs in the meantime. Yeah, it started again. So every year, like, there was this suicide pattern of it, just intenseness. And one of the things I would go through this, and I felt like if I wasn't going to attempt, I kind of came to a point where I needed to decide, like, what am I going to live for? And the first year, I remember I was just like, man, I don't want to live anymore. Like, what's the point of living? And one thing I came to my mind is like, I love my little brother. I love him so much, and I could deal with everyone else being disappointed, but I was like, I don't know how I could do that to my little brother. So I stayed around. I was like, I can't do that to him. I don't care how miserable I get. I can deal with this. And then another year, it just kind of got to that same peak. And
how often was that happening? Would you say, like,
it's like
a year? Or?
Yeah, like once a year. It's when it got to a really hot, like a really intense period. Like it's constantly going throughout that year, but like it's more manageable, and like I wouldn't be completely depressed or completely like I get like during those peaks of the year, I get like debilitated. Like I can't like function as I normally would. It just gets so intense, like with sleeping. And
would it be about the same time every year, or is just kind of a random thing would like set it off?
It's pretty close to around the same time of the year. I don't know, maybe like it can be a little bit earlier and later, but I feel like I remember like 5 distinct moments, and they all seem to be about a year apart. Some might be like 8 months, and one might be a little bit a year plus. And I know like the next year after that, I was like, it just felt like it wasn't enough to live for my brother, and I'm like, what else is there to live for? Hey, there's this girl I like. Maybe this is worth a shot. Maybe a relationship can really turn my life around. Maybe pursue this girl and just see where this goes. And that went nowhere, and that just got that was very bitter and bad. And so I got very hurt from that. And then the next year after that, I got into a relationship with my ex at this time, and I started to go through this peak again, and I'm like, okay, I will live for her. At least I had someone, but like it just that one also ended up kind of going on and off with the relationship like twice, and so that kind of failed. And then the year before, and then the year after that, like again that year peaks, and I'm thinking, I'm single, I got nothing. What do I got to live for? And I remember I just have like my little dog. I love him. His name is Barks. I love this guy. Barks. Yeah, he doesn't really bark a whole lot, but he barks. It's with an X too. It's not even B-A-R-K-S. It's B-A-R-X. I love him, and I'm just thinking to myself, I don't. Who would take care of him? Or I would just think to myself like, oh my gosh, like I love him, and I'm so thankful. Like God put even just my dog in my life. Like he was really very helpful in that season. And then came the 5th year, and that would kind of lead more to like when I got saved from God, and that when I was about to commit suicide, like the final one. And in between those times, I've had attempts. I've put like a gun in my mouth, and at one point I was ready to fire. And one thing that kind of helped, it was just odd. One thing that helped me not do that was me thinking, I read an article one time, and some guy shot himself in the head and didn't die, and now like he lived like miserable with permanent brain damage. And I'm just like, knowing my luck, I would be the idiot that missed the vital parts of my brain, which is probably 98% of it. But like I would miss most of that and just be like permanently decapitated or like permanently brain damaged. I'm like, oh, that sounds awful. I'm not gonna shoot myself. So that kept me from doing that. So I'm like, hey, whatever. That helped from that time. Not because I wanted to live, but just because I just thought it would be worse to, have a bullet damage in your head.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And so in that period, some of the things I started to try to get into, like alcohol was something I did enjoy. I wouldn't consider myself an alcoholic where I needed like a whole bottle on regular, and I didn't really need to drink a whole lot to even get drunk at the time. Like I was very lightweight, with that, which is fine. That was fine. And then I didn't like weed. I didn't like drugs a whole lot. I would just, have a little bit with my friends when they were doing it. But it was never my kind of thing, which I'm thankful for. Like that wasn't anything I would ever consider addiction. That's not something I would ever like, even like, I don't even have any desire to do it, even at the time, let alone now. So, I'm thankful for that. With that, one of the things I know, like at one point in the middle of that suicide, I know one time I was planning to commit suicide, and this kind of led me to a point, and I'm going to just make a little disclaimer. This part's going to be probably a little bit rough. If you have kids, please just put them out of here. But as someone said earlier, kick them out of the car. But no, just be aware, like it's going to get a little bit more harder here. One of the things that it ultimately led me to was, as I started to go from porn, I went into, starting to go into strip clubs and starting to, go there and sneak into there and, get more into there. I just visited ones local here or other ones, and that kind of kept progressing. And, friends would show me some newer things and newer areas to go. And one of the things I ended up going at one point was to a brothel. And my first sexual encounter was with the prostitute, and it was, man, if I had to describe why, I think one of the reasons I knew I was going to commit suicide, or I felt like I knew, and I was like, I didn't want to die virgin, like, forget that. I ain't going to die no virgin. So I was like, I'm just going to do it regardless. I don't care. I know I shouldn't have, but it's just like, I don't care. And I just kind of started to get into that whole mess.
Which probably didn't help your mindset.
No. I felt like that even further just messed me up. Just because, like, I don't know, like, I feel like that's probably why, like, I just had a hard time with relationships, and just because I guess the way I look at it or have looked at it was, like, just in the lens of, like, a transaction. Like, I just don't care who you are. You just have a body and you provide it for me. What else do I need?
So in these 5 years of depression, were you actively searching for, like, a remedy, or what were your thoughts on Christianity at this point? Was it just it's pushing me away because I'm not the same mindset that pushed you away originally of I'm not good enough, or shame?
At one point I did hate God, but for most of that I was just more ashamed. Like, as I'm doing more sin, I'm just like, I don't want to be a hypocrite, and like I just also felt like God didn't want me, didn't care to have me. Like, hey, I'm just this messy, dumb person. Like, why the heck would God want someone like me to even forgive and all that? And so I guess part of that shame and sin pushed me further away, and just kind of, I don't know if I would ever claim I was an atheist, but I would claim that, like, I guess I was hiding from God, or I just didn't want to, or I just felt like God was against me. And so, and again, like, I would occasionally go to God in those times, and, whether, like, if I felt like I was getting a girl pregnant, I was like, God, please just don't. I'm not ready to be a dad. False alarm, not a dad. Okay, God, you're good. you can leave, and I'm just gonna go do my own thing and not learn my lesson. It's like, like yeah, it's so. I knew I thought of him as a genie in a bottle, I guess, in that time. Like he can answer problems, but never did I come to him or think that I should like ought to love him or live for him, and that would be a major part for those 5 years. Leaving that first time encounter with the prostitute, I just started to go into regular, just having regular acts done on me, whether it was, getting happy endings at massage parlors, or it was just knowing where to find brothels. And it's sad to know like that, like this stuff is here and around. And I hate that was. Like, I just never thought I would ever be that kind of person, or I would ever get in that situation. Like, just looking at my life, and like, I grew up a Christian, and I knew like never to do that, but I always thought like those people were scummy, and like, I'm right there, one of them.
I think we talked about that in one of our prior episodes, that you never, in sin, you're never there and been like, oh, I was totally expecting to get here. It's always those little things that kind of slowly tick away until you're eventually where you never thought you would ever be.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's, like I said, just with friends, just things progressed, and, just I started to go into more deeper areas and more wickedness. And just, again, with suicide and depression, like the first excuse and clutch was like, I'm going to die anyway, so why do I care, and yeah, and so like just in that darkness, man, in that lifestyle, like, I don't know, like when I look for remedies or things to like fix my life, I thought some of these things could help, whether it was a relationship, whether it was, just having a social life or friends or something like that. I used to try to study like some of these people who would, motivation speakers and all that stuff, and it just didn't work. It's like, great, I'm motivated, I'm ready, let's go hit the gym, let's get this life put together, and just doesn't work ultimately. And so, yeah, it didn't matter. I would have maybe a good month or two, but I'll just still flop back to depression by default and suicide. Yeah, as things as things are progressing, getting worse, there were points where I would even cut myself, and I never would cut myself in visible places. I would never do it like on the arms or sleeve, because I just never wanted the attention. I feel like that's even worse. I hate attention in general, and so like I would always cut in hidden places, and again, I'm thinking like, how the hell did I get here? Like, how am I in this place? Because as I was younger, I just used to think like, how can people be depressed or miserable? And like, I could not find an answer. A lot of things I know were temporal solutions, and just nothing was providing answers, and alcohol wasn't doing enough, but it was, good sleep medicine. it helped numb the mind, so I wasn't thinking, because if things were quiet, or if I wasn't doing anything, if I wasn't on my phone, if I wasn't listening to music, that's when my thoughts were like, me being alone with my thoughts was one of the scariest things. Like if I had to think about my life, I was like, heck no. I did not want to do that. Silence was my enemy, for sure. All that is kind of pushing me further away into now, like, I'm starting to hate God. And now towards this like 5th year, towards the back end, man, it just, everything started to get worse, and I started to this is where I really believe there is a spiritual battle. I started to deal with like a schizophrenia time and being like, I would see and hear things. I would, hear screaming in my ears, and like, just like, I would just freak out. Like, why was someone screaming? Like, it's in a dead quiet room and there's people around me. No one's freaking out. It's like, what the heck? And I would start to have constant like nightmares, and one particular was like sleep paralysis. And I know some people are like familiar with that. It's just like you wake up and, usually it's like I'm having dreams where I'm possessed by a demon or something like that. It's just so wild. Like, I'm having all these things. I'm seeing these things in my life. And I think a lot of that I would attribute to not only just my depression and suicideness, but like, this is my whole ordeal with horror movies, is like, I really think, like, I used to watch a lot of horror movies with my ex, and I'm like, I think that really opened up some doors. Like, I think that really messed me up mentally for a while. Glad to say I don't hear voices anymore.
That's good.
It's my own voice, And occasionally I like to think I hear God's voice once in a while. Yeah, and so during that season, I would have that. I would start to curse God commonly. And it's one of those things where, like, every day, if, like, I'm just sad, I would just curse God, like, why are you so cruel to me? Why do you hate me? Why are you letting me suffer so much? Why are you, are you against me? And, like, I really freaking hate you, God. Like, I really hate you. Let me just die. And so, like, every night I would just hope I would sleep and not wake up. And every morning I woke up and I'd be extremely disappointed that I woke up and, like, just curse God again every morning. Every time I get in my car and I'm driving, I'm like, I just hope I get into a severe accident. Like, it's so wild to know, like, and think that you're fantasizing your death constantly. And one thing that's even like I live up to this point is it's hard for me to even accept that I'm even this old that I am today. It's so hard for me to get over that, like, I didn't have to die that young. Like, people can live past 30, that just shocks me that I can live past 30, or I can even start hitting close to that age mark. And so I started to also have anxiety attacks, and I just started to I feel like things are starting to get more worse. And so towards, I guess this is going to be about 4 years ago, a little bit more than 4 years, I started to just kind of get really fed up with this. I really got sick of this 5 years of depression, and I wanted it all to end. So I started to journal and write down some of these things, my thought process, and what kind of just start putting out my thoughts on paper, and started to write down a list of pros and cons to why I should live or why I shouldn't live. And, like, that's one thing I have here is, like, this journal here contains actual, like, details of my suicide thoughts and ideas, and it's such a, like, this is like a reminder. It's just one of those things where, like, it's just you look at some old relic of your past and you're like, holy crap, how far have I gone from this point? And so, like, I've written down things that's, like, reasons why I would want to live. Like, I'm thinking, like, I might find meaning or a purpose to live, and maybe I can seek help, and maybe I can have a good life, and maybe it might be some good. And some of the reasons, like, there's a whole lot more list, like the comparison between why I want to live and why I want to die. There's a lot more to why I want to die. So it just seems like it's all more weightier, and the reasons were, like, I kind of believe in this whole nihilistic view of, like, if I die, just everything fades and that's it. And I was kind of hoping for that. I was kind of hoping, like, I'm dead, that's it. There's no more pain. There's no more nothing. And to me that was comforting for a time. But that's kind of leaping on hope and blind faith, thinking, like, that's going to be what it is. And so some of the things I written down was, like, I wouldn't feel empty, and I wouldn't have to deal with anxiety. And I written things where, like, I feel like I don't mean anything in my life, and I am nothing. And here's another disclaimer, guys. Here's something I've written down, and I've capitalized this and underlined it, is I hate myself so much. And, like, just reading that and reminding myself how much I just underlined and hated myself, man, like, it's just something to look back and think, my goodness, where was I? How did I get here? I'm tired of these dark thoughts, and, like, I'm even writing down love is meaningless, and ultimately, like, on the bottom, like, I feel like I am cursed. And so, like, I really do feel like I was targeted by God. And so I start to journal all this, and I start to plan how I would end my life, and I start to kind of, it's, Google doesn't offer a whole lot of how to kill yourself. They just try to offer suicide hotlines, and that wasn't helpful. Like, I just want to learn how to end it, not how to fix myself. Thank you, Google. So yeah, I was like, I had to kind of find out and get creative in how I wanted to do it. And I wrote a short bucket list. I don't even have that in here. Some of the few things I wanted to do, and most of this stuff was so minor. Like, one of them was just, I just wanted to go and get Genza's with my brother one more time, and have one last good meal. And Genza's is, like, my favorite restaurant. We were all just there recently. I love Genza's. I love the sushi and all you can eat there. It's my happy place.
It's a good time.
Yeah. It's a good time. We were there, like, this Sunday, so it was good. I wanted to do just some simple things, and starting to knock out my bucket list, and I had a plan to go to this concert because they were going to be playing my favorite song that's related to suicide, and I just wanted to hear that song at concert live and then end myself after that. So I started to make this plan, and I started to kind of put this stuff down, and there's about a week until this was happening, and I kind of just told God, like, hey, this is going to be happening. If you're real and if you care, save me. I'm going to be finding out whether heaven or hell is real or not, and so I just don't care. I'm tired of this life. If you're real and if you can forgive me, help me. If not, whatever. You're not there, you know. So I just kind of gave God this ultimatum and this challenge. And come like the next few days, it came to the day where I had my planned suicide. I don't know why or what exactly happened, but it almost felt like the thought of suicide just slipped my mind that day. It was almost like you've had this day planned out, and then the day comes, and you remember the next day. Wasn't I supposed to suicide yesterday? Like you forgot, like you've been planning. Like it's just like it felt like you forgot something. Like you know, if it's your like anniversary, like Jonathan, like I don't know if you ever forgotten your anniversary. You know, you're probably a perfect
Never.
husband, but like it's like one of those like you remember like okay, here it's gonna be in a week or two, and then you're like it's the day of, and you just it might slip your mind or something like that. It just I don't know. It just completely slips my mind, and I'm like, why didn't? And so I'm like, okay, I missed my date, and then my anxiety attacks just start to get worse. I would start driving, and like in the middle while I'm driving, if the music paused or I was thinking, I would just start to shake pretty violently. Like I would just start to have this panic mode, and I would literally just start to shake, and I would have to like quickly pull over to the side of wherever I'm at quickly. I don't care. I don't have time to find parking lot. Just pull onto the shoulder lane, park it, and just like it would take me like 10 minutes of just shaking, breaking down to just finally be like, okay, let's go. And I don't know if that's necessarily like a panic attack or not. I don't know what that is exactly. And like, again, there's a lot of things I just don't know what's going on. But all this started to get more intense, and I started to feel like I had heart issues. I started to feel my heart like have problems. So I was like, okay, I'm scheduling an appointment to get my heart checked. Like something's really wrong, and I don't know why. I'm trying to commit suicide. Why am I checking my heart? And so now, fast forward a couple more days, and I'm at this park in Sarasota called Celery Fields, and I'm in my car. I'm in this parking lot, and I start having this one more intense panic attack, and I just start shaking and freaking out, and I'm in my car, and I'm just okay, whatever. Here's another cycle. I'm going through it, and then through this or in the middle of this, I started to suddenly feel my throat shut tight, and I started to feel like something was grabbing me by the neck and just closing, like something just clenched my throat shut. I know like it's hard to usually breathe during those moments, but it was just something very different. Like my throat just shut. There wasn't like, it wasn't, I don't know. And I'm like, oh crap, what's happening? And then we have this thought that like, you're going to die. And I thought nothing much of it until later I realized like this wasn't like my thought. This was literally like a demon or like telling me you're going to die. Like it wasn't like me thinking I'm going to be dying. It's you're going to die. Like someone is telling me. And so I just started to kind of like I guess I'm choking on as I'm like I'm first freaking out, and then I'm just kind of, you know what? I don't care. This wasn't how I wanted to die, but this is what I wanted, and so I just kind of eased into it and like, okay, I guess it's my time. I finally get my what I wanted. I hear God, and I don't think this was audible. I think this was more something just in my heart, or just in my mind, or He spoke to me in spirit. I don't quite fully understand, but like the moment He spoke, I just felt like my throat just kind of like popped open, and in a way that I would describe as like if you were underwater and like if you've ever drowned, you've ever been close to drowning, like you're suffocating, and then you just get out of the water. You take like the biggest gasp and the biggest like like the biggest breath of air you can get into your lungs, and like my throat just popped open. I just took this deep inhale, and I would describe as like I just felt like a light turned on, and like kind of like imagine you went to this dark room and there's no light, and you turn on this light and you see like 1,000 cockroaches just scatter and just hide into darkness, like they just all ran away and scattered. And I just started to be like, oh my God, like, God, you saved me, thank you. And I was starting to be grateful, and I was like, okay, awesome. The next day I'm driving in my work truck, and I'm just going through, and I just see this building, and I just get this sudden rush and urge, like, I have to quickly crash into this car. I have to pick up and go fully gas and hit this building and wall and kill myself. And I'm like freaking out. I'm like, I have to do this, and I don't know why I have to do this. And I'm like, okay, what's going on? I just pull over to the side, and I'm like, what the hell is happening? What's going on? This is where, like, I feel like God was just, or the Holy Spirit or God was just telling me, like, hey, just pray about the blood of Jesus. And I don't remember my exact prayer. I don't remember exactly what I said. I just, and I don't remember, I was kind of rusty even in my theology. You know, I grew up in a church, and I'm like, I don't know why that was so important. I don't know why I needed to pray. I just started praying, like, hey, like, I know you died on the cross for me, and I just pray that, you know, I know your blood forgives my sins. And I started to pray something along those lines. And I remember specifically on that following day is when all this stuff just dropped off of me. And I would describe it as one of those, like, you know, Saul on the road to Damascus, just a massive change and shift in my life. This was not a short thing. This was just like, or over time, this was just like, I literally felt like everything I was attached to and addicted to was dropped off my shoulders and just boom, off. And that was the last of my suicide ideation. That was the last of these things that I'm just going through. And that was just, it all fell off right off of me. And that was the end of my schizophrenia. I haven't had a nightmare or sleep paralysis since. Like, it's just been like, God really just massively changed me from that day. And I knew, like, thank you so much, God. You really are there. And so that's, I had that on my journal. Like, I have a list of, like, it's funny, I even have the date written. October 22nd was the day that I was, like, in that car and in the park, and October 23rd, 2019 was that day I made my prayer, and I just started to write down all the things that God saved me from. And I started to write down, and I love this note. I've written down, like, I've written myself to remember, I repented and believed Jesus is Lord and was forgiven, freed, and saved. And I just started to add a list of all these things that God was saving me from.
That's awesome.
It's powerful.
And so, like, that was the day I was saved, you know? And so that was kind of where my journey led me along. And that was 4.5 years ago, 4 years and like 3 months.
So from 4.5 years ago and 3 months, what you had this massive weight drop, but as kind of we talked with Chris, that wasn't the end of the story, right? So since that time where you've had this weight taken off of you, what's changed?
As insane as that is, and how much God saved me, how stupid am I to fall back into some of this? This is one of those things I'm like, how the heck can I, like, still doubt and fall back to some of my old patterns and habits? I don't know, and I don't get it. And so, like, I wish I was, like, still the same guy on that day that I was saved, like, because for a solid 8 months, I swear you cannot make me frown. And I had no conception in that time in my mind to understand why people were sad. I was like, how can you be sad when God is Lord? Like, Jesus is Lord. Why are you upset? Why are you struggling? Why are you done? Why are you depressed? Why are you, like, don't you know he answers prayer?
Right.
Don't you know he's God? And, like, it was just such a good moment, and, like, no temptation could hit me during that time. It was just, it was one of those, like, I couldn't even look at a girl in the same way I did before. Like, it didn't matter. I loved everyone. Like, it was just so good and pure. And I don't know if I just didn't guard myself, or I was just arrogant, or I just wasn't being watchful or protective. But, like, I would say about 8 months after I fell back into porn, and I picked up some alcohol again, and I started to pick up quite a foul mouth. I don't have, I'm just like, what the heck? Like, am I really saved?
Mm-hmm.
Am I like, did I, like, kind of like as Israel, like where I delivered from Egypt and I had this great miraculous way, the Red Sea came over and just crushed and killed all the Egyptians, and I have this great miraculous story, and then now here I am in the wilderness complaining and going through all these seasons of just doubt with the Lord. It's a struggle, and it's a battle, and like it's such a hard thing sometimes, and that's why I love what Chris said is like, we have that, people look back to that story or that day they were saved, and they think like that was it to make them saved, but like, what are we doing today? And it's one of those things where I wholeheartedly trust God, and I wholeheartedly just think to myself like, God, I'm not saved because I've changed my life or I've turned it around or I fixed it. I wholeheartedly trust and believe in you. And as the scripture says, like, whoever puts their trust in him will not be put to shame. And in one translation, I know you kind of talked about this, will not be put to haste. Whoosh, or what was that? Whoosh, or whatever you said
from Isaiah. Yeah.
Yeah, and I'm like, I wholeheartedly think like, just trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean on your understanding. I wholeheartedly trust, like, when I read John chapter 10, it says, all that the Father has given me is in my hand, and no one is able to snatch them out of my hand. No one is able to snatch. And like, I think of Romans 8, like, what can separate us from the love of God? Can I separate myself from the love of God? Can the devil separate me? Can angels? Can principalities? Can the world? Nothing can. Mm-hmm. And so I hold on to these things, and I hold on to them so dearly because, like, I found that, like, I doubted God, and I didn't know, and I didn't know what his thoughts were for me, but I hold on to, I may not read the most of the Bible, but I hold on to the parts that I do know and the parts that I cling on to, because I'm like, this has to be my lifesaver. This has to be the parachute that I'm going to trust. And that's kind of my 4.5 years, of just falling on my face and just still trusting in God, and believing that he's using somehow my messiness, in my life, and he's demonstrating, like, as 1 Timothy, when Paul's talking about, like, he's demonstrating his love and grace through me, that he may show and reveal his long suffering for those that he will love, and like, or he's just demonstrating that he loves everyone, even those like me who just can't seem to get it right.
You and us both, and everybody else.
Yeah, like, as much as, like, man, I love sharing my testimony, and then I'm just like, so what are you today? Oh, I wish I still live up to that.
Still a sinner.
Yeah, still a sinner.
So what would you say to people that you're now on the other side of it?
Mm-hmm.
Like, you're still, like you just said, you're still struggling with things,
Mm-hmm.
but you're past that massive weight. So the people that are still stuck and still weighed down in that depression or in dreams or just weighed down, what would you say to them?
That's a good question.
And I think some of us feel that or go through that for different reasons. I feel like as I look back and I try to understand more about depression and suicide, as I try to study it, the more I realize, like, there's no logic behind it. There is no, like, you're not going to give someone the answer to why they're depressed. You're not going to give them an answer to why they're going through that. I really do believe it really is something spiritual that, like, as much as, like, some churches may over exaggerate or more over focus on how it's super spiritual and you got to pray, you got to cast 34 demons out of you, or some Christians might be like, hey, just, sharpen your mind and, stop being sad, and I think there is in some level in respect that there is, like, spiritual things happening to me in that time, and I believe, like, a lot of that suicide and depression comes from that. And so, like, I don't think you're going to out-reason.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think you're going to outsmart your depression and suicide. But I one thing I would tell people and share is, like, and if there's one thing I can share, like, and I share this with my nieces and nephews when I was sharing my testimony, is it don't matter how far down you go. It doesn't matter how messed up or how much you think you're just too far beyond saving. Like, God is faithful. And I genuinely believe he is the good shepherd. I genuinely believe he is the one who will leave behind the 99 and just, because he's not satisfied with just 99, he wants you. He wants you, Andrew. He wants you. Fill in your name. He wants you. He's not just satisfied with who's in the church and who's in these walls and in these corners. He cares about the person who's out there and who's outcast, who's alone, who's hated, who's despised, and who has nothing. And so, like, I always just share, like, God is so faithful and he is so there for you, and he will never leave you or forsake you. I genuinely believe that. And so, like, I that's one thing I would wish I could share. Like, I hated God. I cursed God. I knew growing up as a Christian, I should not do these things. I went the worst ways possible, and whether I started going into sex or drugs or alcohol or just living my own life and cursing and blaspheming, God is just demonstrating he is so faithful and loving, and he will never leave you or forsake you. And so that's the one thing I wish I can always share, and I wish people would know more than anything else, is his faithfulness, is his love, is like his steadfastness.
So
You still struggle with depression?
So as far as suicide, which is so funny, like, it's foreign to me.
Yeah.
It really is. And I had an analogy earlier where it's just like, best way I can kind of share it is like, maybe as a kid, you have this toy, and this toy just brings up a certain emotion out of you. You love it. You know, maybe you might have had that little sleepy stuffed animal, and this was so important to you, and you could not bear the thought of this away from you. And then you grow up and look at it, it's like, oh, hey, like, it just doesn't.
Yeah.
It just doesn't seem to affect you. It just,
God
you
did
remember what it's like, and you know what it when it was there, how much you missed it, but like, you just don't care. And so in the same way, like, when I feel like I'm getting a thought of depression or something, I'm like, the heck is that's no like, why is that's not sticking on me? No way. Like, that's not, I don't want that.
right.
But when it comes to, like, I do have moments, and I still do go through, like, depression and just going through, like, life is hard. I wish I can say when I was saved it was easy, and life now, like, I wish I can stay that happiness that 8 months after salvation. Like, why on earth are people sad? And now I'm like, how on earth can people be happy?
Yeah.
Like, how can you be genuinely happy all the time? And it's hard. Like, I just, the devil in the world and Satan throws everything at you, and you know, we go through suffering, but I have this hope that, like, I love Revelations, and I don't remember if this is like the last chapter or the one before that, where God's like, I will wipe away every tear. And I just think, like, every pain, every sorrow, every hardship you went through is going to be answered that day. God's going to, like, he's wholeheartedly going to remedy that. If there's a cleaning product, or if there's like a medicine for that pain, like, that hits it and removes it completely, God has that for us.
Mm-hmm.
Or that pain is not just not because some of us go in time, you know, people say time heals all wounds, and it doesn't. There's still this thing, you know, we may not be bothered by some of the things we used to be bothered by, but a lot of us still have hurt that we carry. And I genuinely believe God has that hope, and he's going to really restore us.
So
that there's a very high hope that, like, all this is for a reason. And God, I trust you, and I have hope, and I will never, I don't need to take my life away, because I know you're here. And until the day you don't exist, or the day that you're unfaithful, or the day that you're not real, that's the day I will go back to commit suicide. But I know you're true, and I trust you.
Love it. So then, last one before we go is, what about the people that don't deal with that, or are outside of that, maybe past it? Is there anything that they can do to help would have been helpful to you in that space, like on the outside
Yeah.
looking in?
So one of the things that drove me away from God was, in my earlier church, there was this closeness to sin. Like, how dare you bring up sin? You're a Christian. You know you shouldn't be doing this. Why are you dealing with this?
Mm-hmm.
And there was no what's going on and how can I help you? And so, like, if you're seeing someone who's going through this, just know, like, there is no logic to this, what they're going through. But, like, be there. Like, I genuinely think, like, just be there, not to give advice and answers. Because the world is full of good advice. You can learn. Everyone has an answer to everything.
Mm-hmm.
Just listen to any politics. Like, everyone has a solution. Yet we're in this really messed up world because clearly the solutions is not what is fixing these things. And so don't come thinking you're going to fix them. I would generally say just love them. Be there, understand them. Like, one thing I often do for some of my friends, knowing if they're going through a hard time, is let's just hang out, man. We don't have to talk. Let's just hang out. Let's just spend the day. Let's just go to the movies. Let's just hang out. Let's go to the aquarium. Let's just do something.
Yeah.
Because I'm here for you. And
Just be present.
Just be present, because I think of, like, Job, his friends. These were the wisest guys in the world, and they're in that second chapter. They were quiet, and they were like, they just didn't say anything because they
sat
saw
with him for like 7 days.
Yeah,
just there,
just not saying anything. And, like, sometimes I think we need to shut up
mm-hmm.
and just listen. Like, and people are gonna be hurt, and they're gonna say something that's gonna be dumb. They're gonna say things that's gonna anger you. They're gonna express, and if you can just bear with that a little bit, and not judge them and not be so harsh to them, just know, like, people need a friend. People need some rock to stand on. And sometimes, and if they don't believe in God, like, be that rock example. Be that person that's there, because the world is shaking and tearing apart and nothing is standing still. But when you learn and trust that, like, God is there and he's that firm foundation, like, that gives me so much encouragement. And so, like, I would say just speak less and be their present. Be their friend. Be quiet for a little bit. There might be a time when you need to speak up. There might be a time when you should say something, but, like, again, Job had the wisest friends until they started opening their mouth.
Yeah.
You know. And what they say is not like what they're saying is completely bad. They're wise. A lot of what they say is really wise, but it's just, that's not what Job was needing.
Mm-hmm.
That's not what That's not what was going to help him to get through his pain. And I love. I feel we kind of, as we read Ecclesiastes, God appoints our seasons.
Mm-hmm.
God appoints our times, and sometimes we just have to go through it. I'm one of the guys, I wish I could have learned the easy way, and I think God needed me to hit my face and land and just break down again and hit myself harder until I can finally just be like, okay, I get it, God.
Mm.
And so some of us are just slow learners. But yeah, I would say just be a friend, really do. And
That's good.
yeah, pray for them. I would say, I don't ever underestimate that. I really do think prayer in the long run will work.
That's
But,
cool. Thank you
yeah.
so much, Andrew.
Yeah, I
for
appreciate you
being
sharing all
willing.
that.
You're welcome.
I'm sure this will be helpful to people. For those listening, if you connect with anything Andrew said, just know that you are dearly loved, and whether it's your dog barks
Yeah.
or a sibling or a friend, like, there's always reason for you here. God has a purpose and a plan for you. And just talk to God, reach out. And if you are not in that phase, I'm so happy and so grateful that reach out to your friends, love on them, say you love them, make it weird, and just be present and shut up sometimes. I need to hear that one.
Yeah.
Be a
yeah.
friend of sinners.
Be a
Be a
friend.
friend of sinners.
Oh,
Thank you.
also, ask questions. If you have anything, if there's anything said ever, please write in the comments and we'll answer it.
Thank you guys.
Peace out.
Take care.